All right, so it is the big election day in the United States of America, and voters are writing the final chapter in this historic presidential election. Long lines of voters, toting their mugs of coffee and also scrolling through their phones, moved pretty swiftly to try and avoid the exorbitant wait times. A record number of early voters is a crucial sign in itself. Over 100 million Americans have already cast their ballots before the day even began. That makes nearly about 47% of the registered voters nationwide. Donald Trump, who remember had pulled off a surprise in 2016, defying the odds and the opinion polls, is hoping to again flip the opinion polls on their head. He's fighting an uphill battle. He's seeking to avoid becoming the first incumbent president to lose a re-election bid since George Bush Sr. in 1992. This election is yet again the most expensive election in American history, with both contenders pulling all stops to make the undecided voters to swing their way. So let's tell you as to what the two main contenders have been up to. Now, both Donald Trump and Joe Biden decided to forego the traditional election day photo op at the polls on election day, as both the candidates and their families decided to vote early. The voters on both sides of the nation's widening political divide are prepared to render a verdict on the future of the White House. With a historic early voting record, the people of the United States have already sent a pretty strong message, displaying their determination to get their voices heard. The battleground states of Michigan and Pennsylvania have been making news on the eve of the election for setting one-day records for new coronavirus cases. And one of the key aspects of these American elections is that the result will actually depend on some of the key swing states. And to get us updates in terms of what is happening in Florida, which is one of the most important states in the American elections this year, we are joined in by Sarah Walton, our correspondent, who's joining us live from Florida. Now, Sarah, let me begin by asking you this. This is as big as it gets, and this is one of the biggest battles that Donald Trump is fighting. Give us a sense of what is happening in Florida at this point of time. I see you are at one of the polling booths. So how excited are people, and which way are they likely to go this time round?
Well, you're right. The battle in Florida are expected to be really tight. You can see a number of people behind me casting their vote at the moment. What we haven't seen here in Tallahassee, where I am, is very, very long lines at polling stations. That's potentially because a huge number of Floridians, about 63% of registered voters, actually already cast their vote before we got to today. But the race here could be really interesting. In early voting, Democrats took a very slight lead, registered Democrats casting more ballots in early voting than registered Republicans. But it has been predicted that many more Republicans actually like to turn up on this final voting day. And what we're seeing from some of the early numbers coming in is that in certain parts of Florida, two counties in particular, Miami-Dade County, Broward County, turnout has
Sarah,
been
I'll have to
higher
interrupt you there because we're getting visuals
important
of Joe Biden, who's just stepped out. I think he may say something to the cameras as he's just waving at the crowd. We heard the American president, Donald Trump, speak a little while back. He was, of course, at the RNC in Virginia. Joe Biden is presently out, and this, of course, is going to be an incredibly tight race. The opinion polls, of course, have been suggesting that Joe Biden clearly has been in the lead for the last several weeks leading up to the polls. But how confident is he? And it is in the swing states that a lot of the results. He's presently in Philadelphia. These were the visuals that we were getting of Joe Biden there. And the American voters are lining up. They are casting their ballots. The in-person voting is presently underway. And my colleague Sarah is with me from one of the polling stations in Florida. Sorry, Sarah, I had to interrupt you there because we were just seeing Joe Biden. We expected him to speak to the cameras. But you were telling us about how crucial the state of Florida is. It was here that Donald Trump had sprung a surprise last time round. Can he do it again this time?
I mean, that's the big question, isn't it? What we're seeing in some of the early figures coming in, that in some parts of Florida where there are particularly high numbers of Latino voters living, there is a higher than expected turnout today on the final election day. And that is a group of voters that Donald Trump has, particularly been trying to increase his support amongst, particularly focusing on Cuban Americans, people who left the socialist regime in Cuba to come to America. Donald Trump has been using his rallies to paint his opponent, Joe Biden, as a socialist, someone who would turn America into a socialist country. So the fact that there is increased turnout in areas where Latino people are living, that could potentially be important. Another announcement we've heard in the last couple of hours is a judge in Washington, D.C. ordering the United States postal system to do a sweep, a hunt through some of their facilities to check for postal ballots that have not yet been delivered, and that will include their facilities in South Florida. Postal ballots important because election experts tell us they are more likely to have been cast by Democrat Party supporting voters. Now, all of this may just sound like it's small numbers, just comparatively small groups of people. But the margin here in Florida is expected to be so close that even if the United States Postal Service suddenly just finds a bag of postal votes that haven't yet been delivered to a ballot, that could prove to be incredibly important. And because Florida has so many electoral votes up for grabs, 29, the result here could potentially swing the whole result for the country one way or another.
I think that's a very crucial and an important point that you make, Sarah. Do continue to stay on with us. Meanwhile, I am told we're also joined in by Mr. Rick Rosso, who is a senior advisor and also a Vadvani chair on the issue of the US-India policy studies. Rick, thank you very much indeed for joining us on this broadcast on WION. Let me begin by asking you this. Donald Trump, at this point of time, many would say, is actually fighting an uphill battle. The opinion polls quite clearly indicate that it is Joe Biden who is in the lead. But it is the people of the United States who are going to decide that. What is your opinion? What is your take on how well Donald Trump is placed to make his comeback?
Well, there is a lot of focus on these national level polls, but as you well know, it's a small number of states that actually will be the determinants, although that number of states is perhaps a bit wider, because now that you see a large swath of America throwing their support behind Vice President Biden, the numbers show that states that typically hadn't been in play in a lot of past elections, may very well be. So, we look at Michigan, Ohio, the state of Virginia, where I've lived quite some time. Suddenly Texas, other states are called into question as to which way they're going to go. But you always got a big difference then between, when you got these polls versus who actually shows up to vote. Because voting's been a lot easier for people, the fact that the numbers lead in Biden's favor probably speaks pretty well. But certainly wouldn't be the first time that a democracy threw us a surprise when you give people the vote. So we'll be watching this evening and tomorrow with bated breath.
Absolutely. And also, Rick, very quickly on this, a lot of people have been talking about, look, in the opinion polls, etc., when you call up people and ask them which way they're going to vote, they would say Joe Biden. But these are people who may not actually turn up at the polling station and cast their vote. While Donald Trump supporters are much more committed and are more likely to walk into a polling station and cast their vote to elect him. Do you agree on this assessment?
Well, sure. I mean, we saw it 4 years ago. So, I always like to go based on things that we've actually seen rather than things that folks dream up in my line of work at think tanks and other things. 4 years ago, exact same scenario. Now, I think there's some fundamentals that show that Vice President Biden's campaign is a bit stronger. You remember 4 years ago at the last minute, you had additional email concerns raised about Secretary Clinton before the election. She was already losing a bit of steam in some of the polls there. So you don't have exactly the same fundamentals, but still overall, she had a very healthy margin when you look at opinion polls. She won the popular vote. So You never know till it's over. So exciting times ahead.
Absolutely, indeed. Rick Rosso, do continue to stay on with this. Meanwhile, Sarah, if I can get you in on this. I'm told that we are getting some shots of Joe Biden. I think he's just going to address his supporters. Let's listen in to what Joe Biden has to say then.
Thank you. Let's go. I tell you what, From the time I started as a U.S. Senator, Philadelphia brought me to the dance, man.
We love you, Joe.
I'll tell you what, you've been great to me my whole career. Yes, I'll tell you, as Joe Village, so goes the state of Pennsylvania.
Punch your head up a little bit. It's okay, it's okay.
The turnout's been incredible. The job you're doing is incredible. I really mean it. I really mean it. I can't thank you enough. I want to introduce you to two ladies with me. Come here. I want to introduce you to my granddaughter. This is my son, Bo Biden, who a lot of you helped elect to the Senate in Delaware. This is my granddaughter, Natalie. This is Bo's daughter, and we're out campaigning together. And then Hunter's number 2, who goes to school here in Philly. This is my granddaughter, Finnegan Biden. Thank you.
You can stay right there.
Please wait a minute.
So, folks, I can't thank you enough. Look, the country is ready. Predicting that we're going to have more people vote this year than any time in American history. They expect over 150 million people to vote. And guess what? People between the ages of 18 and 13 or 18 and 30 are turning out in big numbers. That's going to be a big deal. And by the way, you guys don't understand, 54% of the vote so far is women. I tell you what. Got a lot of things backwards. One of which is he thinks that he can decide who gets to vote. Well, guess what? The people are going to decide who gets to be president. Look, folks, I'm not going to keep you standing here long, but I want to say one thing. We have an enormous opportunity as a country.
You got to make a decision where you're going to go next time, please.
We have an enormous opportunity. I want everybody to understand. The public nationwide has figured it out. Not only are we going to be able to overcome this virus by taking some smart moves. For real, we're going to do it. But secondly, we're going to rebuild the middle class. And by the way, the middle class built this country and unions built the middle class. And thirdly, I promise you this. Although I'm running as a proud Democrat, if you elect me, I'm going to be an American president. There's going to be no red states or blue states, just the United States of America. We're going to show, I really mean it, we're going to pull it together. We're better positioned than any nation in the whole world in the 21st century. Our workers are 3 times productive as the rest of the world. We have more great research universities in America where everything comes out of than all the rest of the world combined. We just have to remember who we are, damn it. This is the United States of America. Everybody knows who Donald Trump is. We got to know who we are. We choose hope over fear. We choose truth over lies. Over fiction. We can take this. I promise you. I'm going to take responsibility. When I make a mistake, I'll admit it. But I tell you what, I promise you, I will never break my word to you. And by the way, Air Force, thanks for your service, pal. Thanks for your service. Tell me to stop. Okay, I'll stop. You want me back up. Last thing I'll say. The president said a lot of really nice and good things. The one that bothers me the most is when I'm seeing an Air Force guy here, is when he said that vets are suckers and losers. Well, let me tell you something. No president's ever said anything like that before. No, I'm not joking. Thank you. And by the way, my son Bo Biden was the Attorney General. He gave up that seat to go fight in Iraq. He won the Bronze Star, the Conspicuous Service Medal. He was no loser. He was a who serve. All who serve. This guy doesn't understand. He doesn't understand sacrifice. He doesn't understand. He talks about being a tough guy and what a macho man he is. When's the last time you ever heard when a president shows up at the United Nations and the whole UN laughs at him? That's never happened before. Or when he shows up at a NATO meeting and they make fun of him. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the reason why 6 generals, commanding generals who work for him, resigned, left, and said he wasn't fit to be commander-in-chief. Folks, I'm so happy to have you all. I tell you what, and I promise you. God protect America. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's expected. There's already over 110 million people who have voted in the United States.
Yes.
They're expecting up to 150 million, the largest turnout ever. And by the way, folks, if you haven't gotten everybody out, get them out. It ain't over till it's over, and when it's over, we're going to win Pennsylvania because of you. In Delaware thinks I moved to Pennsylvania. So I'm leaving here to go to Delaware. I'm going back home and I'm going over the east side where I used to work. And because that's where I started. And I tell you what, people are turning out at home. So as much as I love Pennsylvania and I'm a Pennsylvania guy,
it's okay.
I am a Delaware.
It's okay.
Go
We love it.
thank you, thank you, thank you.
That was Democrat contender Joe Biden there stating that if he is elected, he will be a president for all Americans. And Rick Rosso is still with us. Rick, if I can get you in on this. I think Joe Biden touched on some very important points while he was addressing his followers there in Philadelphia. He said that if you were to elect me, then there will be no red and blue states. I will be the president of the whole of the United States of America. You know, the fact of the matter is, in the last 6 odd months, the racial fault lines in the U.S. society have been exposed. Do you think if Donald Trump were to continue, this is actually going to be a situation that could get worse? And Joe Biden, if he were to come in on the basis of things that he's saying, he could actually improve things in America on this particular issue?
I don't know that things would necessarily get worse on that scorecard if President Trump is reelected, but certainly the division that's here right now that the president has chosen to kind of wrap himself up in, you know, to try to secure the base that he has, which is extremely strong. I suspect that you'll see it continued. He may lose a bit of momentum, you know, if the Democrats continue to use that to fuel their continued victories in Senate and House races, which I think is a very likely thing if President Trump remains in office. So might take the edge off a little bit if Democrats have a little bit more power on Capitol Hill.
Right.
I do think if Vice President Biden is elected, he's got a long history of working across the aisle. So I think that a bit more bipartisanship makes sense. But again, his ability to get things done sort of depends on whether or not Democrats are able to take the Senate or not.
Right.
If not, then I think Republicans will have a chance on stymieing any big initiatives that he has. So a bit of a mix, but I think Biden's got a track record of working across the aisle, which I think, you know, the country very much needs now.
Absolutely, indeed. And Sarah Walton has been very patiently waiting with us from one of the polling stations in Florida. Sarah, last question to you. And this, of course, is what is going to be the crux of this election as to how soon will the votes be counted? There are different procedures in different states. What's it like in Florida? When will the mailing votes be counted? And how soon can we expect a result in Florida?
Well, we might get a result from Florida comparatively early. You mentioned there about counting of postal ballots in particular. We've heard a lot about this during the election campaign, the idea that postal ballots can take longer to count than ballots cast in person, but also that some states will be counting the following day after the final election day. Not in Florida. Florida has a long tradition of using postal votes because they have a larger elderly community, people who are less mobile and like to send their vote in by post rather than going in person. And so actually, Florida has been tabulating those postal votes as we go along. It should get a figure pretty quickly. It will add that to the count for the votes cast on the day. A delay could be caused if it is very, very close and there needs to be some recounting done. That could be a possible delay, but if it all goes smoothly, there is a very good chance Florida's result will come on election night, early in the next morning. And because of the large number of electoral votes in play with Florida, a win for Joe Biden would mean it is almost certainly game over for Donald Trump. There would be very few paths for him to get the 270 electoral votes he would need for another 4 years in the White House. If Florida elects Donald Trump again, we then start looking at the other swing states, particularly Pennsylvania, where we saw Joe Biden a few minutes ago. It is those states that then come into play, and those are states where they will have a slower counting process. And at that stage, you know, when we find out who is the overall winner, the president that will serve the next 4 years, that could take some time.
Absolutely, indeed. Thank you very much indeed to both Sarah Walton and also to Rick Rosser, who joined us on this broadcast on WION. This, of course, is the biggest day in American politics. Can Donald Trump spring a surprise? Remember, the opinion polls predict that it is Joe Biden who's presently leading, but then you never know. This, of course, is the election that is going to witness the biggest voter turnout in American history, near to about 150 to perhaps 160 million Americans could be voting in this election. We'll be getting you all the updates as they happen.